This is CBS.
Coming up on the Noon Report, a jewel robbery turns into a shootout in St. Paul. In Mankato, a dozen farmers take over the local PCA office. President Reagan gives tax reform new life in the U.S. House. And the execution of a powerful organized crime figure could touch off a gangland war in New York. Those stories and a bitterly cold forecast coming up next on the Noon Report.
Last year, hundreds of adults called the Basic Skills Hotline. Many of these people are now on their way to a better future. Join them. Please help someone or yourself by calling the Basic Skills Hotline, 644-6631, 644-6631. One call could change your life.
It's the chew, just for you, so delicious through and through. That's the turtle from Demet's, the original, don't forget. The turtle that's earned its stripes.
Seiko orchestrates the movement of time. Finely tuned thinness. Synchronized design. A spirit of innovation. Seiko quartz clocks, moving time into the future.
Americans have a peculiar image of the Frenchman, wearing expensive clothes, surrounded by beautiful women, and sipping champagne. Not true, although I must admit I do enjoy my champagne. Thank you. It's J. Roger champagne. It's deliciously crisp, dry, and yet romantically subtle. It fits my simple lifestyle. J. Roger, perfect for a quiet night at home. J. Roger champagne, one of life's simple pleasures.
You are watching WCCO Television, Minneapolis, St. Paul. All today's news with Bill Carlson, Tony Saffold, and Bud Kraling. And now, this is the Noon Report.
Shades of resentment as the curtain comes down on a way of life. The increasing numbers of farm foreclosures are making farmers angry. Just how far will their protests go? Good afternoon, everyone. Tony Saffold has the day off. Mankato, Minnesota is the scene of the latest protest by farmers against their creditors. It's going on at the office of the Production Credit Association. A dozen farmers are holding a sit-in, and WCCO's Terry Sater has more. Terry?
Bill, the groundswell members took over the Production Credit Association office here in Mankato around 7:45 this morning. The protesters are demanding a blanket moratorium on farm foreclosures, and they requested Governor Rudy Perpich come to Mankato to negotiate. Perpich has refused and is also saying no to the moratorium. State Attorney General Skip Humphrey has spoken with the protesters by telephone. Reportedly, he told them they'd have to come to the Twin Cities if they wanted to talk. A spokesman for the protesters says they don't intend to damage property or harm anyone. Even so, 2 PCA employees are inside guarding office records. Blue Earth County Sheriff's deputies have sealed off the building, and Sheriff Leroy Wiebold is inside talking with the farm activist at this time. The attorney for the groundswell protesters, Stephen Rowley of Redwood Falls, is now on the scene. He is inside, as well as we believe the attorney for the Production Credit Association, Bob Halverson of New Ulm. Right now, we're not really sure what's happening in those negotiations, but they're trying to get the groundswell people to give up, obviously, without any violence of any kind.
Okay, Terry, and you'll stay on the scene and report later on later newscasts.
Of course.
Thank you very much. One of 2 suspects who allegedly held up a St. Paul jewelry store was shot and critically wounded this morning by a city policeman. Details are still sketchy, but the suspect was shot twice by the officer when he was cornered in a store about a block from Rogers Jewelry on Wabasha. The suspect allegedly held 3 people hostage in one portion of the shop at gunpoint. It's not clear yet whether he fired at the officer before the shooting. He's hospitalized in critical condition at this hour. A second robbery suspect surrendered to police just after the stick-up. Both suspects were carrying guns. It's not known yet just how much was taken during the robbery and if what was taken was recovered. In Washington, the House of Representatives is expected to pass some sort of tax reform package today. That after the measure appeared dead last week. Republicans were opposed to passing the Democrat-sponsored plan until the great communicator paid a visit to Capitol Hill. Ike Pappas reports.
Late last night, the House Rules Committee gave new life to the tax reform bill, voting to bring it back to the floor later today for debate. The final vote is expected to be close, but Democrats are hopeful of passage.
You're looking at a natural-born optimist. This bill has had the last rites on so many occasions. I'm hoping that one day we'll see the resurrection.
It was President Reagan's trip to Capitol Hill yesterday that broke the tax reform deadlock within his own party. The president met with rebellious Republicans and emerged smiling.
Mr. President, did you rescue tax reform?
We're just having a Christmas party.
In fact, it was no party, but what was called a raucous caucus, resulting in the president getting the 50 Republican votes needed to guarantee that the tax reform bill would clear the House.
Well, there's no question but that the president appearing personally before the conference obviously must have had some effect on some members.
Democrats accused President Reagan of being a lame duck because of his inability to control House Republican leaders on the issue of tax reform. But Mr. Reagan's visit here yesterday demonstrated that he has lost little of the clout he has enjoyed in Congress over the past 5 years. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
One issue not resolved last night was a stopgap spending bill. House Democrats objected to an increase in Pentagon spending and voted it down. So as of midnight, much of the government went broke. At this moment, lawmakers are working on a compromise spending bill, but it's possible some federal workers will be sent home today while Washington runs on empty. New York officials are bracing for an all-out gang war following the execution last night of the reputed boss of the nation's most powerful crime family. 73-year-old Paul Castellano, the alleged boss of the Gambino family, was shot to death in Manhattan late yesterday afternoon, along with his driver. Castellano's death leaves a vacuum in organized crime, and authorities fear a bloodbath as various factions fight for control. St. Paul police are still investigating a fatal accident on Shepherd Road this morning. Police say it happened just after 8 a.m. when two cars collided near the intersection of Shepherd Road and Randolph. A 21-year-old woman died in the accident. The eastbound lane of Shepherd Road was closed off for a time. And in Burnsville this morning, firefighters were called to a 4-alarm blaze at Rosemount Engineering. The fire broke out in a chemical lab just before 5 a.m. No one was injured. The fire was brought under control within an hour and a half. The amount of damage still being calculated. In Glenwood Springs, Colorado, the death toll has risen to 11 in the explosion of a building at the Rocky Mountain Natural Gas Company. A 12th victim has yet to be found in the smoldering wreckage. The blast was apparently triggered by a welder doing repairs on a propane tanker truck. Rescue workers say they were hampered in their efforts to save some of the victims by certain situations existing at the time. That 12th victim is still being searched for throughout that smoldering wreckage.
Television helicopters circling over the scenes, obliterating the sound of the voices. We were having difficulty finding the people within the building who were yelling for help.
13 injured workers were pulled from the ruins or hospitalized at this hour. There were no survivors in the Aero Air DC-8 that crashed last week in Gander, Newfoundland. A report in the New York Times may shed some light on why that plane crashed, killing 248 U.S. military personnel. The Times quotes an investigator who says one of the 4 engines had its reverse thruster engaged when it went down. The reverse thruster slows the plane down on landing. That may explain why the plane dropped suddenly and turned to the right. Twin Cities-based Northwest Airlines has opened a new addition to the airport terminal. The space-age Concourse has a price tag in the millions. Mike Walcher has more.
The new Concourse cost Northwest $23 million, and it gives the airline 7 new gates, 27 in all at Twin Cities Airport. Republic, by way of comparison, has 16 gates. At ceremonies late today, Northwest officials unveiled a 1920s biplane that'll be displayed here permanently. And they emphasize the new gates will serve the quieter 757s.
By the end of the decade, we will have 60% of our fleet in fuel-efficient, quiet aircraft. And I think that's a major step in the right direction as far as the environmental concerns are.
But the hottest conversation piece in the new Concourse may be this, a moving sidewalk. It's the first at this airport and the longest of any airport in the United States. It's 1,300 feet long, and outside of problems with folks not moving over to let others pass, the walkway's getting rave reviews.
Well, I've ridden them before. It's very enjoyable. If you're in a hurry and it's a long way to go, it beats walking.
Well, I just got done writing on the thing for about 20 minutes, and I thought, other than wanting to get some exercise, I'm just glad to be here. Would have been a lot of work.
And if that's not enough, here's the clincher, a soon-to-open McDonald's. Officials predict it'll do so much business, it may jam up security checks into the new concourse. I'm Mike Walsher, WCCO Television News, the Twin Cities Airport.
When I got up early to go to work this morning, my dog looked at me as if he thought I was crazy. He's still back at home in the warm bed.
Smart dog. No matter how insulated you may feel yourself to be, last night was a cold one, and we're all trying to cope with the chill. Our forecast is coming up next.
Break free and feel. Feel how splendid you are with the fragrance created by Gloria Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, a rich, expressive fragrance that reveals to the world just how splendid you are. Vanderbilt, let it release the splendor of you. Vanderbilt.
Farm rich, farm rich, farm rich quality like farm rich. Snack sticks, rich goodness from the farm.
Discover Farm Rich Snack Sticks, the delicious, lightly battered snacks you just heat and serve. Made with the finest ingredients like real cheese, grade A vegetables, and natural fruit. So wholesome and good. After all, they're Farm Rich.
Farm rich, snack sticks, rich goodness from the farm.
We're honoring the working women of America with Honors Fashions from Target. The classic camp shirts, French terry knit tops, fashion sweats, all on sale for just $9.99. Because there are clothes you have to wear and clothes you want to wear. Honors from Target.
Mon Dieu, c'est bon?
No français.
I haven't seen you here before.
I've never been here before.
How did you ever find this place?
That's it. You've just won the trip of a lifetime on Wheel of Fortune, and it could change your life.
You're a very lucky girl. And I have the feeling that tonight, your life will change.
Wheel of Fortune, whose life will it change tonight?
Last fall, Minneapolis city officials said they wouldn't seek state aid to build a convention center complex. But now that Bloomington has dropped its bid to build such a center, there's a proposal to seek direct state help in building the Minneapolis Center. Pat Kessler reports.
There are no convention center commitments from legislative leaders, and Minneapolis Mayor Don Fraser is said to be cool to the idea. But Minneapolis lawmakers will seek direct state aid for their convention center, even though Mayor Fraser has publicly stated he doesn't want it.
I never have 100% of the same opinions that the mayor does, and the legislative delegation really has not made that statement.
Hetty, who is not running for re-election, will ask for something less than $160 million over 20 years from the charitable gambling tax. The city would guarantee construction bonds, and construction materials would be exempt from sales taxes. Despite apparent lack of support, Petty believes the state should back projects with statewide significance.
And maybe we're not talking about the subsidies on the scale that we were talking about last year, but I think that some type of state assistance for a statewide facility is still reasonable to expect.
Bloomington leaders who last week dropped a convention center from their plans were astounded. Their chief legislator called it sheer folly.
For them to now change and say that they're now going to be requesting state funds, I think is really an outrage.
Supporters of a Minneapolis convention center say the chances for state aid depend to a great degree on how much help the Bloomington Mega Mall will get. Considering all the twists and turns of the long and bitter two-city fight, next year's legislative session promises at least to be a lively one. Pat Kessler, WCCO Television News.
St. Paul Winter Carnival officials say the massive Ice Palace project may be in jeopardy because of difficulty in getting liability insurance for architects and contractors involved in the project. A $1 million policy will have to be in place before the construction company will begin. Meetings with insurers will continue today. A decision should come by the end of the week. certainly is cold enough to provide plenty of ice for that palace. The mercury dipped to a balmy 17 below overnight, putting pedestrians into a variety of contortions to keep out the cold. Just think, we still have January and February to look forward to. Notice I'm keeping it positive, Bud. I said
Yes.
to look forward to. We had to break out the record books last night, huh?
We did, 17 below. It was, we matched the minimum temperature record for the day, last set on this day, 1983. And obviously, it's not even winter yet. Gee. Well, I'd like to have you read along, the viewers, too, on today's weather menu. We've got one warm dish, a cold dish, and several colder dishes. So here's today's weather menu. The warm dish, we have the Hawaii forecast a little later on. A cool dish is the Alaska forecast, but a colder dish is La Crosse. They were 19 below this morning, and that's a minimum temperature record for the day. Eau Claire even colder at 21 below, and that again set a minimum temperature record for the day at Eau Claire. 17 below here in the metro area, just a tie. Partly sunny now, temperature at 4 degrees below zero, humidity 68%. The wind is from the northwest at 17, gusting to 24 miles an hour. The wind chill is a -41, and the pressure's falling from 30.14. So it's partly sunny. Temperature now is 4 degrees below zero. Here's the warm dish. Mostly sunny in Hawaii, high near 80, low tonight at 60 degrees. Now the cool dish. We take you to Alaska and our forecast there. This afternoon, Barrow should warm up to about 10 below. They'll have a little snow. Nome will warm up to 18, 2 above at Fairbanks, 32 at Anchorage, and rain at Juneau with the afternoon temperature at 42. Now, overnight temperatures in a good chunk of Minnesota were 10 to 20 below, 22 below this morning at Brainerd. That's the official cold spot of the country. Now, the 20-degree line at 20 above zero starts in Montana. It was 25 above this morning at Great Falls, 29 this morning in New Orleans, and 25 this morning at Charlotte, North Carolina, 41 this morning at Tucson, and one more temperature, Tampa this morning at 51 degrees. Notice I said 29 this morning at New Orleans. They'll warm up to 53 degrees, Phoenix to 70, Spokane at 22. The cold front runs through parts of Kansas and the southern part of Illinois. Last night, 3 to 6 inches of snow from Sioux Falls, South Dakota to 4 at Des Moines, Iowa, 3 at Peoria, Illinois, and an inch of snow at Indianapolis. Chicago should be 13 for the afternoon, and Boston at 35. Now, how about the metro area? Partly cloudy this afternoon. We'll be right around zero. Northwest winds at 10 to 20 miles an hour. Tonight, mostly clear, dropping down again to around 16 degrees below zero. Northwest winds at 5 to 15. And for tomorrow, partly cloudy again with temperature at 5 degrees above zero. Now, the average afternoon temperature this time of the year is 25 degrees. So we've been at least 20 to 25 degrees below the average for quite some time.
And at least for a couple more days, it'll be Shiver City.
It looks like it.
Okay, thank you, Bud. Now, looking at some news in brief today. At Cape Canaveral, the flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia has been postponed until Thursday morning. The countdown team needs more time for preparation. In Belgrade, Yugoslavia, Secretary of State George Shultz will be discussing increasing trade between Yugoslavia and the U.S. It's his last stop on his tour of Eastern Europe. And in New York City, health officials are negotiating to lease a hotel to shelter AIDS victims. City officials say some AIDS patients are being evicted from their apartments and have nowhere to go. Coming up next on the Noon Report, a story on sleep disorders. For one local man, sawing logs was more like falling off a log.
Oscar knows me here. Oscar knows me here. And there. And here.
From the man who knows what makes a woman beautiful, Oscar de la Renta Fragrances. Now, your free gift, 1/8 ounce parfum with any Oscar fragrance purchase at Dayton's.
And now you know.
Introducing the best handling iron on earth, the new cordless Freestyle from West Bend. Because the Freestyle works without a cord, you can easily take on sweeping curves, hairpin turns, quick changes of direction, even 360-degree spins. And thanks to its electric power base, the Freestyle heats up faster than most conventional irons. The new West Bend Freestyle cordless iron, sold at the garage. Now available at these stores.
As divorce today rips couples apart, women wonder, are divorce laws fair? This week's Picture Week looks at how divorce laws paid off for Stallone's wife, but not for many others. Picture Week, the new magazine from Time Life with a lively look at Bobby Kennedy's son Joe running for Congress. Plus, human interest stories like Cyndi Lauper and Dionne Warwick singing the same tune. Picture Week, vivid pictures and just the right words. See for yourself, only 95 cents. Only 95 cents. Divorce laws, are they fair to women? In the new Picture Week magazine.
Sleep disorders affect about 1 out of 8 of us. There are several types of disorders. The Hennepin County Medical Center's Sleep Disorder Clinic was the first facility in the country to identify one particular sleep problem. Health and Science reporter Tony Vigneri explains how the problem affects one man and how he's being treated.
For 6 years, Mel Abel acted out his dreams. He was an active character in them.
I'd jump out of bed and not knowing it until I run into something or hit myself.
Sometimes he would somersault out of bed, perhaps in his dream leaping into the air to catch a crook, but only ending up smashing into the dresser or the wall.
I can show you in the other room there where in the wall there where I dove in. It looks like a soup bowl from my head and the whole front of my face, and loosened up my teeth.
It got so bad that Abel would strap himself in bed at night.
I've got this little rope here with a belt on, and I'd put this around me like this, and at least that would keep me from jumping.
Sometimes his wife would sleep on the couch.
Well, there's one time I was sleeping there, and here he grabbed me by the neck, and I yelled, "Melvin," like that, you know. Scared the devil right out of me. And here he thought he had gotten a deer, and he was choking the deer.
Research on Abel and 4 others with similar problems answered some puzzling questions.
Most of us, when we're in dream sleep, our bodies are paralyzed, which is probably a protective mechanism because our brains during dream sleep are more active than they are during wakefulness. These individuals do not have this protection of being paralyzed during their dreams.
During one of Abel's nights in the sleep lab, he swore, punched, and kicked.
Quit using your good bones for banging like that. Now.
Abel was willing to acknowledge his problem and seek help for it, but doctors say most people do not.
In our experience of our 5 patients, at least 2 and probably 3 were very embarrassed by this condition. They didn't want to tell other people, and they were fearful that it was a reflection of mental illness.
Doctors prescribed a drug to solve Mel Abel's problem, and it works. He now sleeps at night without the fear that he'll take an active part in his dreams. Tony Vigneri, WCCO Television News, the Twin Cities.
Coming up next on the Noon Report, several high-budget movies are hitting the theaters in time for the holidays. Some comments from the competing directors up next.
Time takes you beyond the news.
Time flies and you are there. Time cries and lets you care. You understand the world we share.
This week in Time, TV giant RCA ties the knot with GE. Plus, Time examines the changing color of sports and the season's most colorful children's books.
Read Time and understand.
Creative Lighting is now having its semi-annual clearance sale. Savings of 10 to 60% on every lamp and lighting fixture. From traditional to contemporary. From Torchiers and track lights to Crystal and Tiffany. 10 to 60% savings through December 28th on the Twin Cities' widest selection of lamps and fixtures under one roof at our only location.
You'll find your lighting store on Highway 94. Creative Lighting, where you'll see the lights.
Overlooking I-94 just west of Snelling and St. Paul.
Maplewood Mall, take 3.
I enjoy the variety of women's fashions here.
They're always up to date. The merchandise here is of good quality, and that's important to me.
Being a motion picture director has its rewards, of course, and there are also moments of uncertainty, even for the most successful of them. This Friday, 3 very major movies will be released simultaneously, and their directors are nervous. Sidney Pollack has made 13 films, has received 31 Academy Award nominations. He not only directed Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman, but acted in it as well. Richard Attenborough has capped a long and distinguished acting career by winning the directing Oscar for Gandhi. And Steven Spielberg is unquestionably the most commercially successful director of all time, with half of history's 10 most successful movies to his credit. But this week, they're all nervous. Sidney Pollack has spent 3 years, 5 months of it shooting in Africa for $30 million to make Out of Africa, starring Robert Redford and Meryl Streep. It opens Friday.
It's the worst time for a director, really. I mean, there are problems and tensions and dilemmas always when you're shooting, but at least you can do something about them. Problem now is that it's all finished. I can't do anything about it. I'm really in the hands of everybody else now, the audiences, the critics, and so one feels particularly helpless and usually particularly anxious at a time like this.
Despite a long and successful career, Richard Attenborough voices some uncertainty about taking on his current film, A Chorus Line.
But I must say, to be asked to make one of the great landmarks in Broadway musical history, or Broadway history in general, was something of a surprise. And of course, when I actually woke up one morning and realized I was going to do it, I wanted to go back to sleep. I really was very nervous indeed.
And that nervousness leads to an appeal to Steven Spielberg to share some commercial success.
If I could just steal one. Steven, can't I have just one?
Commercial success is the story of Steven Spielberg. At one time, his various ventures were bringing him $1 million a day. But the movie The Color Purple is another matter.
It was a risk for me in the way I feel and view myself. Yeah, it was a risk, and can I do something like this, and can I do it well enough to encourage myself to do something else like it someday. I sort of made a promise to myself after I did Indiana Jones, you know, which I really had a great time doing, that I wanted to do something that was a little more dramatic and a little more personal and a little more sensitive and totally a film that did not rely on any of the magic tricks that are easy to pull out of the hat.
You can see why they might be nervous when you consider that those 3 movies have a budget, a combined budget approaching $100 million. There's a lot at stake. Now, they're in their personal reputations.
That much money makes me nervous.
It does. Your personal reputation is at stake, but if we can't do something about this weather.
Put it on the line here. We're 4 degrees below zero right now, and warming up to around 0 today, and 5 above forecast for tomorrow. So we're saying partly cloudy and very cold, I think, hits it pretty close now, that 4 below reading in the metro area now.
You know, I don't know why I just did that. All the years I did weather, I hated it when anybody blamed the weatherman for bringing the message on the weather. Well, Bud, thank you for that report, and thank you for being part of our news today. Please plan to join us once again tomorrow. Have a good day.
A Channel 4 editorial on the death of a fetus with Ron Henberg.
We think it should be a crime for someone to injure a pregnant woman, injure her so that she suffers a miscarriage or stillbirth. The head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Alan Speer, is proposing such a change in the criminal statutes, a change that gets to the point while avoiding a needless debate about abortion. His plan for defining this new crime has our enthusiastic support. This accident made the need for a new